I am so excited to introduce Matt Hillenbrenner, who is a seasoned regulatory and innovation leader. You heard that he has familiarity with NETA from the FDA, really deep experience in advancing medical technologies from concept to market. So, formerly with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, he played a key role in guiding regulatory strategy and supporting the safe and effective introduction of new medical devices. Now at Fogarty Innovation, Matt works closely with startups and innovators to navigate regulatory pathways, accelerate product development, and bring transformative health technologies to patients. His expertise bridges regulatory rigor with practical innovation, helping teams move more efficiently from idea to impact. On a personal note, outside of work, Matt really enjoys hiking with his wife, talking sports with his sons. He's a Bears fan. Go Bears. Attending his daughter's musical theater performances and traveling as a family. My first real recognition of Matt was the two of us were kidnapped. I wouldn't say kidnapped, but we were snatched from a company event, thrown in a car, and taken on what I would call an unforgettable adventure. Matt and I will always have that bond. So I'll turn it over to you, Matt.
Great. It wasn't an Uber ride, but I mean, it was an experience. That is
It
for
was.
sure. Well, thank you, Ingrid. I appreciate the introduction. I was asked to talk a little bit about personal development today. And, as you mentioned, I spent a lot of time at the FDA, but I am going to talk a little bit about sports. I thought a little bit about, sort of personal experiences, and common themes throughout my career and journey. I think blending, both my personal life and professional life, it's hard to avoid that. So I'm going to take you back a little bit to high school and high school sports. And so I grew up playing, baseball, soccer, basketball. I thought for sure in high school I would just play all those sports. Turned out that was not in the cards because I was cut from the soccer team, cut from the basketball team, and I didn't know it yet, but I was also going to be cut from the baseball team. And so, what was I going to do now? This is obviously pretty disappointing. One of my really close friends, though, he was a lifelong swimmer, and he said, why don't you come out for the swim team? And I thought, well, I've never swum competitively before. I don't know if this is the right thing for me. But importantly, high school swimming was a no-cut sport, so they couldn't turn me down. And I figured, all right, well, I'll give it a try, and I'll dip my toe in, so to speak. I showed up to the first practice. We were running time trials. I was so slow. I might have been the slowest swimmer on the team. I don't know for sure, but it was rough. But I figured I'm going to stick with this. We're going to work at it. It was kind of fun being part of a team. One of the earlier speakers talked about taking risks, and thinking back about that, sometimes I think we think about something as this is the taking of the risk, sticking with the swim team, where it's not, clearly I'm not going to be great here. I think the real risk was not sticking with the swim team, and all the things I got out of that. And I think that's true elsewhere in life too. So end of the season comes along, one meet left to go, and the coach is asking for volunteers to swim the long distance events. So that's the 500 freestyle. And, nobody's raising their hands. Everyone's kind of looking around. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not really good at sprinting. I can make it through a 50, maybe 100, but yeah, what the heck? Why not? I'm gonna swim the 500. So I raise my hand. I'm the one dumb enough to raise my hand. And I think this is where I really, we've moved past the dipping the toe in, and I'm diving in. And I think just that one decision and how the rest of things played out was huge for me. I swam the 500. I don't think I was fast, but I did survive the race and made it through. And sort of, heading into sophomore year, I figured I'm going to stick with this distance thing. And, there were really just two of us who were swimming the long distance events, and I started to get a little bit better. I decided I'm going to go to morning practice. I'm going to go and join the varsity team We had practices 3 days a week at 5:30 in the morning. I grew up outside of Chicago, and this is a winter sport, so this was not easy to get up and get out swimming, indoor swimming, but still. Um, and I was still working my way up a little bit to the point where the coach had to give me my own lane because otherwise all the other swimmers would be lapping me the entire practice. And but I'm working hard, and I think that's one of the other big lessons here is sort of the importance of hard work, starting to improve in my times, and I'm getting a chance to interact with upperclassmen, and I think this is sort of my first exposure to mentorship and seeing how people with a little more experience are approaching things. This sort of continues, and I'm improving, but I'm never going to be state swim meet type of material. But I think I learned a few other important lessons along the way, and I think I started to get a sense of leadership. I ended up being voted as a captain by the time when I was a senior year and going into my senior year, and I learned I didn't have to be the best at something technically or the expert to step into leadership roles, and just the value of being part of a team. And so thinking back on that experience, I think there are a number of themes that really helped me later on in my life and my career. And we've heard about some of these things already today, really being willing to step outside my comfort zone and try new things, both to get in the pool in the first place, but sign up to do distance events. The importance of working hard and putting your best foot forward when you get an opportunity. And speaking of opportunity, sort of maybe seeing past what the initial opportunity looks like. And I'll talk about that again in a minute. And obviously had a lot of room to improve as a swimmer, and it's important to be aware of our weaknesses and work at them and try to improve. But to not be afraid to play to our strengths. And I didn't spend time trying to figure out, okay, I've got to be a really good sprinter. I need to learn how to swim butterfly and figure out how to do that. Instead, I pivoted a little bit and said, all right, well, there's an opportunity over here to swim distance. I'm going to do that. There's a need to be a good teammate and to be there for my team. And then lastly, sort of the importance of investing in people and relationships. And I made some lifelong friends, who I still keep in touch with. One of them I talked to last night about a career move that he's making, and stepping outside his comfort zone. And so I think those are some things that have carried forward, and I think been really helpful as I've navigated a few other circumstances in my career. And I wanted to talk through a few of those. First, I mentioned earlier I had been at the FDA for a long time, and I started out as a lead reviewer, which is the entry level role. And I was specializing in the review of heart failure devices. And a couple of years into my career, the cardiovascular management team, a couple of folks had come to me, and they were looking for help to take on a particular role, and they needed someone to step in as the lead reviewer for this, controversial, high-profile device in a heart failure device. The lead reviewer was taking a position in a different office, and they sort of described this to me as this novel product. It's really exciting. We just went to the advisory panel, and they recommend not approvable. So we're working on the not approvable letter in that package. Meanwhile, the company is really challenging and difficult to work with. They're confrontational, and they've already told us they're going to appeal this if we issue the not approval letter. So would you like to take this on? And this felt a little bit like being asked to swim the 500 freestyle. But similarly, I sort of thought, well, it was nice that they came to ask me. I didn't have a really good reason to say no. And I said, all right, I'll take this on. And it was a launching point for my career. Up until that point, I hadn't really interacted with even the cardiovascular management, let alone folks higher than that in the organization. And it was a very challenging assignment. It was not simple. it was a novel technology where clearly it helps some people, and there's other things that don't look right, and we felt like we had to uphold the protect patients and public health side of our mission. But by the end of this project, I had been interacting with the cardiovascular management team regularly, including plus two levels up in the organization, biweekly meetings with the center director at the time. And I feel like it really put me on the map in terms of internal and external exposure, and paved the way to my first management position, which sort of was the next big pivotal moment. I'd been, got into this position through my interest in heart failure. But one of the prime focuses of my time there was really on heart valves. And I didn't know a lot about heart valves from a technical perspective. But this was a really exciting time to be in that space. This was, really when transcatheter aortic and mitral valve technologies were taking off. They were really getting going in clinical trials, and I had a front row seat to watch, one of the most disruptive cardiovascular technologies really come into the space and help patients. It was really challenging with a conservative review team. And I mentioned I wasn't really the technical expert, but I sort of embraced my role that I needed to, build a team and lead a team in finding new ways to regulate and to sort of meet this new technology halfway. I also got to see the benefits of the whole ecosystem approach and, FDA approval, CMS coverage, and it was really an education at the time. Fast forward many years, I had the privilege of being in a number of different leadership roles within the cardiovascular group and really getting help to help build the organization, going from a division of around 60 up to an office of, upwards of 150 people. And I got a call a couple of years ago asking me if I would step away from cardiovascular to help launch a new innovative program for all breakthrough technologies. And, it was hard to step away from, a group that I had helped build and was comfortable in, and I knew all the people, and I had gained a lot of experience with different device areas. But again, it sort of felt like, yeah, maybe we should try something new. And I did learn a lot in that role in launching a new program and thinking about things a little bit differently. But it also put me on the short list of FDA folks to attend a fellowship program that FDA had with Fogarty Innovation. And so a couple of years ago, I had the chance to come out to Fogarty Innovation for a week and really be immersed and better understand the startup culture and perspective. And while that was really interesting, in and of itself, it gave me a chance to meet members of the Fogarty team and see the amazing work that we do. And I really don't think, without having had that experience, I'm not sure I'd be sitting here today. And that led me to the most recent big move and change in my career, which was to join Fogarty Innovation after over 20 years at FDA. And sort of give up the comfort of, again, being very familiar with the people in the organization and all the acronyms, which we were talking about in a different session last week, and join a new team where I spend a week a month on the West Coast and not with my family, and really, again, learning new things. But it's been an amazing experience for the last 7 months. I left some question marks there as to where does this lead next, but I'm really excited about that opportunity. So just, in closing, I think if there's one key lesson I would say is don't be afraid to take a leap. I took this picture on the Rock of Gibraltar a couple of weeks ago. They have a population of Barbary macaques for anyone who hasn't been. And this little guy was leaping for a car. They're all over the cars there that are going through. But again, circling back to these lessons, they were things I learned many years ago, and they've continued to serve me well throughout my life and my career. And thanks again for the opportunity. Mentoring has been a big part of my life, and I'm glad to have a chance to participate in this program.